All right. So you want to build the cheapest possible Space Marine army. You have not a lot of money, but you like how those guys in power armor look. And don't get me wrong, I've been there. I'm still there. So I'm kind of the expert in this field. That's not true. Why you're here? You're probably here because you have no money. All right. Or maybe you're just bored, but if you're gonna use this video, then you're probably here because you have no money. You can see this is you, okay, with no money. Or maybe you have money, but you don't have money, or you don't think you have enough money to start a Space Marine army. And this is me, all right, clearly. And I'm going to show you how to build a cheap Space Marine army, all right? So the basics. All right, we're kind of just getting right into it, but we're going to be using the Gladys Task Force because it's universal. And probably, I don't know, never played it. I only play Ironstorm Spearhead because I am one of, I believe, 3 or 4 people in the community that are Iron Hands players. We'll be doing a list for 1,000, 2,000, and 3,000 points. So let me just make one thing clear though, before we get into it. The cheapest possible one I'll show and I'll explain the borderline, the cheapest you can go for an army. But I mean, when I show you, you're gonna be like, "Oh, that's dumb. I don't want to do that." So I'll show you the cheapest, and then I'll go into actual detail on ones that are very cheap, but not exactly the cheapest. Okay, so the cheapest is a 1,000 point army, and it's gonna be a 40k starter set, the Dark Angels Combat Patrol, and the Redemptor Dreadnought. All right, this is a little expensive, but you kind of need it because the 40k starter set comes with 5 Terminators, a Terminator Captain, and 5 Infernus Marines, and it's only $112. It's a really good deal because you don't only get that, not only do you get that, but you also get Tyranids. You get half a box of Tyranids. So realistically, it's $112, but you could sell the half a box of Tyranids, or I say half a box, the Tyranids in the box. You could sell that and the extra stuff in the box if you don't want it for, I mean, you could maybe get close to making your money back. Don't know. I don't buy secondhand, but I'm just too rich for that. You know how it is. Anyways, yeah. So you could maybe do that, but we're just going to assume that, you're keeping them, you're practicing painting on them, whatever. That's what I did. So you're going to get the 40k starter set. You're going to get the Dark Angels Combat Patrol for $168. And I guess I should break it down. This is the price of the box. This is the amount of points in game it's going to get you, and this is the points per dollar. I might say points per pound a couple of times just because it sounds right, but um, I'm not British. Anywho, this is what you're gonna get. And let me just go ahead and break it down. The cheapest possible list for you to get is essentially, I mean, I didn't go into every individual model, maybe secretly Reavers are the cheapest unit ever or something, but I mean, that's not true. This is the best deal. Combat patrols are pretty much across the board a discount versus buying individually, especially for characters. This combat patrol and the starter set both contain a character, and this is the character, the Terminator Captain. He's like I believe $40 or $50 thing just in himself, just because he's a character. And I mean, business wise, it kind of makes sense why he's so expensive because realistically, you're only ever going to buy one of them, whereas you might buy multiple captains, but or Terminator Squad, But it's still crazy, all right? We're paying a lot of money for what is effectively Lego minifigures with guns, all right? That we then have to paint. Anyways, so yeah, that's where you're not gonna buy any characters. You can't have a cheap list and be buying characters. Redemptor Dreadnought is pretty expensive for one model, but it really does. It gives your army the ability to actually kind of kill stuff or kill heavy stuff like an enemy tank. This is your one tank, okay? Everything else is infantry. Technically, these are technical Dreadnought armor, but So, anyways, the absolute cheapest you can get for a 2,000 point army or for a 1,000 point army is this. For a 2,000 point army, it's this times 2. For a 3,000 point army, it's this times 3. That's the cheapest. If you want the absolute cheapest is this. And like I said, if you can sell the starter set, it can be even cheaper. And that would come out to less than $1,000. if you sell the starter set, like the other half of it. But that's really boring. I mean, technically, if you want to get technical about it, the cheapest 1,000 point army is buying like 3 starter sets, basically. You just can't use one of the Terminators, captains. And then boom, 1,000 point armor for only around $300, $400. Um, which isn't much better than this. So yeah, it's like, I don't know, it'd be a little cheaper. And if you did sell the Tyranids, then it'd be, yeah. But I mean, do you really want to sit there and paint 15 Terminators, 15 Infernus Marines, 3 captains, and just say, "Yep, that's my army"? Yep. It's kind of lazy and kind of cringe. All right. So your 1,000 point army list for this right here is going to be Captain in Gravis armor, Captain in Terminator armor, who's going to be your warlord. Although it really doesn't matter. It's just the Terminators. He's tougher. 2 5-man intercessor squads, which can be ran as 1 10-man intercessor squad if you want. Not really a point in doing that, especially in a small game like 1,000 points. Kind of want more units. There's not really a downside to having 2 separate ones, only positives. Um, Blade Guard veteran squad for some melee. The Hellblasters are pretty good with well, really with Space Marines. They're pretty good at killing Space Marines and other tougher infantry. Infernus Squad is great for like horde armies, like what are they called, Gretchen and Tyranids with their Termagants, whatever they are. Good against weak infantry. The Terminator Squad is very tough, unless the enemy has anti-armor weapons. But at 1,000 points, if you're like specializing to kill one thing, this is not a terrible list for being how cheap it is and being what you're getting. Anyways, and the Redemptor Dreadnought, that's your tank killer. The rest of these, they can probably kill a tank or like a big monster, like a big Tyranid or like a what are those big orc thing called? You know what I mean? But the Redemptor Dreadnought, you're definitely gonna want to take like the Macroplasma Incinerator. This is your anti-tank. And you could technically switch this out for like a Ballistus if you just want one, but I mean, the fact that this equally all comes out to exactly 1,000 points kind of says that this is how Games Workshop, this is how they want you to play the game. Now, of course, you're going to get Dark Angel's accessories and whatnot in this box. I mean, you can just play Dark Angels if you want. As we go on, you may say, oh, wait, maybe I shouldn't have done that, but whatever. Or you can just put them on there and paint them to look whatever chapter you want. I really like Blade Guard Veterans. They're really cool. And I believe one of the upgrade sprues in the Combat Patrol has the Blade Guard Veteran helmets that have the hoods on. And they just look really cool. All right, trust me. Just trust me. So yeah, your Captain in Gravis armor, I mean, in a 1,000 point game, he's decently tough. So I would probably just put him on the back objective, on your home field objective. The Captain and Terminator squad definitely needs to be leading the Terminators. They could probably go to one objective, whereas like probably one squad of intercessors to both of the other objectives, alongside either the Blade Guard or the Blade Guard veterans or the Hellblasters. And that kind of leaves your Inferno. It depends on what the enemy team is doing. Like if the enemy team, if they deploy a bunch of like weak infantry, then probably put the Infernus Marines closer to them. This army is going to be very. I won't say the game would probably be won or lost for this army in the deployment phase, but like kind of, since there are no transports. So if you put your Infernus squad down and then in front of that squad, excuse me, the enemy puts down like a dreadnought or something, and on the other side of the board is some weak infantry that the Infernus squad would actually do good against, then it's like, no. Same thing like the Hellblasters. The Hellblasters are pretty good, like I said, against tough infantry and sometimes tanks. Depends on how risky you want to be with them. The Blade Guard's about your only. Well, the Blade Guard and the Terminators are both. The Blade Guard's obviously specializes in melee, but the Terminators are pretty good in melee with their power fists. And with the starter set, you will be box locked to the Stormbolter for the Terminator Captain and the Assault Cannon for the Terminator Squad. You cannot get the missile launcher thing. all around, this isn't a terrible list. You won't lose every game with this list, I don't think. This is actually what I'm planning to do with my Space Marines currently. Anyways, so yeah, and intercessors do have sticky, so you might just put one in the backfield, and you kind of can like go around in that area in case anyone's trying to deep strike or something. And that is something that I forgot to mention. This army doesn't really have is deep strike. Technically, the Terminators can deep strike, but like, who's doing that? I typically, with my Terminator squad, just put them on an objective and then they just sit there. They just sit there the whole game. They shoot at anything that comes close. They're really tough to kill. Um, so yeah, that's about it for your 1,000 point list. No room for enhancements, but just the fact that it came out to exactly 1,000 points was just, I didn't expect that. So yeah, no room for enhancements. And I think Gladys is probably the best one. Maybe Firestorm would be pretty good since you have the Infernus squad, or even Ironstorm. It's not called Firestorm. What's it called? The Salamanders one. You know what I mean. And like with the Redemptor, maybe the Dreadnought. I mean, the Ironstorm Spearhead would be good, but that's probably just me being biased. There's that one detachment, I forgot the name, that's very Terminator armor heavy. It's maybe that one. Anyways, 2,000 point list. Buying the same things. What I'm doing here is building off the previous one. So it's kind of like a calendar you follow. That's the wrong word, but you know what I mean, a sequence to build up your army. So the next things, obviously you're buying the same three things there. Then you're going to buy a Storm Raven gunship, which isn't the cheapest at 2.2 pounds points per dollar, but it can carry dreadnoughts, and you're gonna have two dreadnought models. At least I believe the tactical warsuit can be carried by it. I'm pretty sure it can. If not, definitely the Redemptor can, and that's good. Anyways, it's a transport mainly, but it does have some really good firepower. You're gonna buy a Storm Raven gunship for $125. Other than combat patrols, I believe that is the most expensive thing you're getting for this whole video. So there's a Storm Raven, 280 points, 2.2 pounds. What am I saying? Points per dollar. Then there's the Space Wolves Combat Patrol for $168 for 430 points, a little bit less than the Dark Angels. And you're going to get all this over here. We'll go into that in a minute. You're going to get, what, 10 more Intercessors, 5 Reavers, a Lieutenant, and a Invictor Tactical Warsuit. And then you're going to buy 2 Armigers, which technically, oh, those aren't Space Marines. No, but they're really cool looking, all right, for one. And if you're going for cheapest, you probably need to go for stuff that actually looks cool. Because what's the point of buying cheap stuff that you don't like the look of? Anyways, Armigers, they're cool, and they're also pretty useful and very fast for what they can do. Like, they can just kind of zoom around the board and kill stuff, especially depending on, because you get to choose out of 3 different types of Armigers. Not technically for this list, you can't take 2 of the ones that are the most expensive in points, because then you're over the points limit, but you can kind of mix and match them. You can take 2 of the cheapest ones, or 1 medium of the middle ones, and 1 of the cheapest ones, or the most expensive one, and then the cheapest one. Because you get 2 in the box. You get 2 Armigers for $94, which is I believe it was 100 and I think this is the most expensive one, or the cheap. I don't remember how I did the points for this, but yeah, depending on how you build them depends on the points, and that is important because we are getting we cut it close to 2,000. So this list, same as before with all them, but now we have the lieutenant, which we do have some points left over here. So if the person you're playing against isn't like, kind of mean, if he's a chill guy, this is just a friendly game and it's not a competition, then ideally you can run this lieutenant as a lieutenant with combi weapon for I think it was only 5 points more. So you can just, proxy him or whatever. Because the lieutenant with combi weapon is really good at sneaking around the board and doing secondary objectives. And just, he has a lone operative. He can't be shot outside of 12 inches. He's just a great model. Like all the competitive lists have him pretty much. So yeah, if your opponent isn't not a nice guy, or if it's not a tournament or something, just ask, okay? Just don't go saying, no, just ask. Say, hey, is it okay if I proxy this? Or maybe they won't even notice, and you just tell them, yeah, this is a combi weapon, Lieutenant. Otherwise, this is just a standard Lieutenant. That's what it says in the box. I don't own this box, but on the Games Workshop website, very trustworthy source. I know, I know. Um, it just says Primaris Lieutenant, so I just took it as the basic lieutenant. It didn't say, you know, with combi weapon or anything like that. So if it is just the normal lieutenant, then he can go with the intercessors, any of the four intercessor squads. He can go with the Blade Guard veterans. I believe it was the Hellblasters he could go with, and the Infernus as well. Most of the squads can take him with it, and he has some pretty cool. He has some nice buffs there. I don't remember what they are, but he did have some nice buffs. Anyways, two more intercessor squads, one Reaver squad, which you can build the Reavers as either a close combat sort of team, which is probably more what this army needs, or you can give them rifles and they can kind of sneak around and they have precision, so they can sort of snipe characters, but they don't have a lot of range to be a sniper squad like that. Either one you want. You probably, I mean, you have the Blade Guard veterans and the Terminators, as well as you can build the Armigers we're about to get to. You can build them as the melee, the one right here actually, with the melt-a-gun and the big chainsword thing. So if you need melee, you kind of have them, but yeah, I don't know, it just depends on what you want. Just pick whatever looks cool, really. That's what really matters. Because you can always just run them as something different. Just build whatever looks coolest to you. Anyways, the Invictor Tactical Warsuit, it's a pretty good model. Um, and it has something, I forget exactly what it was. I believe it gives the Reaver Squad cover if they're near it, or something along those lines. It gives some sort of buff to the Reaver Squad if the Reaver Squad is near it. Just don't remember exactly what it was. The Storm Raven, which would probably be carrying your Redemptor and putting it in a good position. Uh, Planes are kind of weird in 10th edition. I mean, I started in 10th edition, so I'm just saying in 10th edition to sound cool and hip, but uh, yeah, they do move funny. It's like you have to like move them each turn or something. I don't know, it's weird. Although this one might have hover. I don't remember. I should do more research before I go preaching to people about how to make an army list. But anyways, yeah, the Invictor Tactical Warsuit, Storm Raven gunship, and then the two Armigers. I forget which is it. The I can't talk. The Warglaive, I believe, is this one, and then the Helverin is the one that has the autocannons. So, um, and like I said, there is the third option. I forget exactly what it was called, but it's more for anti-vehicle, I believe. It has like a grav cannon, so you can just kind of pick between those three for these two. Anyways, this is it's a bit of a silly list, but it's cheap. It is like, well, I didn't even go over this. For less than $750, you can get into a 2,000 point game or even tournament for that matter. I mean, it's all tournament legal. Anyways, so yeah, the lieutenant, if you can run him as the combi weapon lieutenant, definitely do that. Very good model. Sneak around the board, he can do secondaries, all sorts of stuff. And most of this stuff stays the same. Now you might, since you do have four intercessor squads, you might get to where you're like, okay, maybe I don't want to deal with four, you know. So you might have two squads of 10 or three or two squads of 5 and one squad of 10 or something along those lines. The Reaver squad has, I believe it has deep strike. You give them the grav shoots and they get deep strike, which is another thing that you kind of need in this army. So, because this army is kind of lacking in stuff that can just sneak up anywhere. The Invictor Tactical Warsuit's another kind of centerpiece model. It's going to be doing a decent amount of damage, and it's decently tough. So it'll probably be out in the middle alongside. There's a lot of walkers in this army. I'm kind of just realizing there's four at least. Um, and then the Storm Raven can also carry squads of troops. It can carry 12 infantry. So it can fit 10 intercessors plus like the lieutenant, or it can even fit the entire Terminator squad plus their captain. Or you could fit 5 intercessors, 5 Infernus Marines, anything along those lines. I believe Blade Guard veterans are wearing normal armor. So you could, let's see, 8, 13, no, you couldn't. Yeah, well, there's all sorts of combinations throughout this army. I mean, you could fit like the Reaver squad with the intercessors in there, just whatever you want, whatever the opponents, pay attention to what the opponent has, and then say, hey, I need this, so I need these guys up near the front quick or something, or I need these guys behind enemy lines quick. So, yeah, and the ability to just carry a dreadnought is kind of crazy. You can just run him up the board and just set him down. So yeah, not a terrible list. And the Armigers, they were just good for the points. It's half the reason I picked them. Like I said, they look cool. I'm also just a huge fan of anything that has the Melta keyword, so you can build the Warglaives with Meltas. They do have these cool chain swords as well, but yeah, the Armigers should be able to deal with big stuff like enemy monsters. It depends on how you kit them out, obviously. Like if you have two Warglaives, and they're going to be more for melee and stuff. If you have two Helvrins, they're going to be more for like infantry and kind of heavy infantry. And then the other one, which like I said, I forgot the name, is good for vehicles. And you do have a little bit of, forgot to mention, you have a little bit of extra points here for if you want to put like an enhancement on one of these. I don't know if there's any good ones that you can fit with Gladys, but you can get the Feel No Pain one on the Terminator if you go with Ironstorm, which is very good because it makes a really tanky model, being the Captain and Terminator armor. Then you give him the 4-up Feel No Pain, so then half the time he just doesn't take damage. It's great. And like I said, run this as a combi weapon if you can. For your 3,000 point army, why is the Storm Raven here? That one should have been up there. Alright, whatever. For your 3,000 point army, um, lost my train of thought. You're going to be buying two Desolation Squads, which are very expensive in points. Overpriced. No one takes them. They were good at some point, but not anymore because they're 200 points per model. You can buy two Desolation Squads for $120, which is 3.3. I believe, is that our highest one? That's even higher than the starter set. Yeah, the 3.3 points per dollar. Two Land Raiders for $184, which is 480 points for 2.6 points per pound, or points per dollar. And the Inceptor Squad is actually our most expensive in terms of points. I'm sorry, in terms of money to point ratio, almost just barely 2 points per dollar. But it is, and I could have picked something else that was cheaper for better points per dollar, something along those lines. But this is actually going to be very helpful for something because this army struggles with like deep striking so far. I mean, not everybody needs to be able to deep strike, but the ones that can deep strike aren't very good. Whereas these guys are really good, and they have like a 3-inch deep strike rule. They're just good, all right? These are taking a lot in competitive lists, so you just want this. Also, I keep talking about competitive. I lose all my games, but um, I'm getting that's not true. I win occasionally, but I'm not like a pro player, and this list should not be taken as like extremely meta or anything. I mean, there's like what, two, three characters in it, so yeah. So for your 3,000 point list, all this is staying the same, except we're adding two 5-man Desolation Squads, which are once again incredibly expensive. They do have some cool indirect fire, and you probably build one as anti-tank and one as more anti-infantry, because that's what their weapon kits allow for. There is the three Inceptors, which are just great at deep striking. It's really your choice of which weapons you want. It depends on, honestly, what looks cooler. You can always run them as this side or the other. And then the two Land Raiders are really going to give the army a lot of that movement that they were missing out on, as well as some decent firepower. Not much to talk about here. I mean, we're only adding 5 things compared to the other ones. First one that didn't have a combat patrol. If you're playing Blood Angels, then you could maybe sub in the Blood Angels combat patrol instead of the two Desolation Squads, because there's some pretty cool stuff in there. But I ain't doing all that, all right? If I do a video about this for Blood Angels, then Anyways, so yeah, 5-man Desolation Squad, 5-man Desolation Squad. Like I said, one for tanks and one for anti-infantry or kind of anti-horde sort of stuff. They have some really cool keywords and stuff that you can make use of. Now, they're really not worth it for the 200 points. They're really cool and fun unit, but for 200 points, they are not. It's not worth. I mean, that's more expensive than Centurions. That's more expensive than. I mean, where's the Redemptor Dreadnought? Yeah, that's 10 points less than a Redemptor Dreadnought. Like, and they've been at 200 points for like a long time at this point. The Inceptors are going to be your great deep striking guys. I mean, you just need them, right? They're great. And the two Land Raiders, like I said, your transports, you can put your intercessors. I mean, you could put both. You could put 10 intercessors in one, 10 intercessors in the other one. You could put the Infernus Squad and the Hellblaster Squad in the Storm Raven gunship, stuff like that. You're going to have a lot more ability to move around with this. Okay, finals here. 1,000 point army, $359. 2,000, and I'm not converting them into pounds, all right? Just do it yourself, all right? I don't know how to do all that. 2,000 point army is 746.50. I'm just gonna say that. Just cut that off. Anyways, and the 3,000 point army is $1,100. I ain't reading all that. But you can go to Amazon. This is direct from Games Workshop. Through Amazon, you can get, or I say Amazon, there's other ones as well, like different, like I think, like brick and mortar stores, not Warhammer stores. They're the same price as this, or at least mine is. But brick and mortar game stores, if you have those around, then they are usually cheaper, as well as Amazon and other online retailers. So if you do put in that 10% discount, you can get, you know, 223 for the 1,000 points, 672 for 2,000 points, and under $1,000 for a 3,000 point army. And if you sell the other half of the Tyranids box, it can be even lower, maybe even 950. Now, obviously, I'm not accounting for taxes or anything like that, but taxes are different for different people. So, anyways, I mean, if it's a 10% sales tax, then you can just take this and go back up to this. But then, hey, this is what it is with tax, which isn't terrible for a hobby as expensive as Warhammer. For a hobby as expensive as buying these little plastic dudes to paint and then, roll dice with, $1,100 for a full army that you can play with for, I mean, I guess the rest of your life, really, is not terrible. A little Amazon logo down here. Playability. The 1,000 point list, yeah, they're going to be slow. There's no transports. The Redemptor Dreadnought's decently fast for what it can do. But yeah, that is true. I like how I wrote this, and I'm like, yeah. This guy's right. He's right. It will be tanky though, because you have Terminators and the Redemptor Dreadnought. The Redemptor Dreadnought has a special, or not even a special ability, just like a trait or whatever, where any damage that it takes, you reduce the damage number by one. So unless the enemy has damage two weapons or above, they can't do damage to them, which is extremely good, especially for 1,000 points. I mean, it's almost like unless your army, the enemy army is, because AP doesn't matter if it's only doing one damage. Unless the enemy team is like specifically geared towards killing Redemptor Dreadnoughts, they're gonna struggle. Or at least they should, because a lot of cheaper units, because in a 1,000 point list, you want kind of more cheap units than more expensive units, or than less expensive units, I mean. And yeah, they will probably struggle, especially with Terminators. I've been playing Terminators in 1,000 point games, and they rarely, if ever, die. And I don't mean the whole squad, I just mean one Terminator out of the group. Now, they are really slow, though. This whole group is really slow. The 2,000 point list, well, it's not entirely slow. You have, like I said, your Intercessors, your Blade Guard, your other guys, but, they're weaker than the Terminators and stuff. Anyways, 2,000 point list is probably the most well rounded, yes. Because I just kind of started throwing stuff into the 3,000 point one. But with the Armigers and the Storm Raven, and then of course your Redemptor, you're going to be doing a lot of good moving damage, while your other guys can do ground objectives. The 3,000 point list is, yeah, I started picking high point units. You probably don't need two Land Raiders plus a Storm Raven, probably. I mean, I don't know. Never played 3,000 points. Oh, I don't know. I'm just kind of going off of it as like a multiple of two and one. But yeah. On a side note, I love Desolation Marines. I mean, look at them. Look at, go back. You're spoiling it. You're spoiling it. Look at them. They're so cute. People will hate on them, like, oh, their guns they're too big. This is so this, like, I mean, I might kit bash them to be like to put like the missiles on this little thing back here. I think that would look really cool, right? Because like you put these two missile launchers on this thing, and it like where he's looking is like where it would turn. And you can just keep the rest of the gun. They look cool, all right? People hate on them, but they look so cool. How can you hate on them when they're this cute? The end. Subscribe and such. I might make more of these. This was pretty fun, but yeah, I mean, I will be talking out of my field because I only have, and when I say Tyranids, kinda, I just mean I have the other half of the like starter set, which I mean I could sell if I wanted to make some money, but you know what I mean. And Iron Hands, which is Space Marines, obviously. feel free to drop a comment and tell me how bad the audio quality probably is, or anything along those lines, or your own cheap recommendations. Or just tell me about how I don't know how to build lists and how I'm focusing too much on the ability to deep strike or something. I don't know, just be mean about it. I don't know. I'm not very good with my armies right now. Anyways, that is true. That is true. And I don't think Auspec's tactics, who I'm not copying at all because clearly my slideshow is black, his is like white, so pretty different, but whatever. I'm pretty confident that he doesn't play every army in the game, but I mean, I'm not hating. I'm not hating. I believe everything he says. He's like, whenever I go to buy something, I look up like his like rankings of units and his like tier lists and like just all this like stuff. Like he's like my main source. I go there and I'm like, oh yeah, right, right. That's true. I'm like taking notes and stuff. Cause honestly, yeah, and don't just blindly believe me. Don't go drop $1,100. All right, go do some other research. Try building your own list. But this is just kind of for fun, just to see how cheap and how cheap I could make an army that was like half decent. So yeah, like and subscribe. Blah blah blah. Bye bye.